Spectator.com.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. President Trump over in jolly old England. Probably spots of tea with the Queen. Yeah,
well, he was with
British accent's pretty good.
Prince Juan, because I played Miss Anna in The King and I. I was the I in King and I.
You could be like a vixen in a Guy Ritchie movie.
You don't say, love.
Yeah. Yeah, all right.
But he had a sports of tea with Prince Charles and Camilla.
Yeah.
And then later had this fancy dinner.
All the pro forma stuff.
Now he's meeting with Theresa May, talking about trade, because once they leave the EU, he wants to work out a new trade deal.
Yeah, if and when that happens.
She's leaving Friday, so.
And he's already endorsed Boris Johnson.
Yeah, who he said he has a wonderful relationship with.
And the same hairstyle.
Exactly. They kind of look like distant cousins, don't they? Maybe second cousins once removed.
They sort of do, which is interesting because this piece in The Spectator by Freddy Gray suggests that Trump shouldn't waste his time worrying about what Sadiq Kahn, the mayor of London, has to say. The mayor of London, not particularly important. Well, the former mayor of London, Boris Johnson, may be, some odds makers suggest, is the odds-on favorite to replace May. For more on this topic, let's talk to our friend Freddy Gray, editor of The Spectator. Freddie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Good morning to you.
Morning. So let's start with Sadiq Kahn, and if you could fold in Boris Johnson there. He's turned being a mayor of London into being a possible prime minister. Why couldn't Sadiq Kahn do it, and shouldn't America feel threatened about that possibility?
Well, I mean, Boris Johnson was a very successful mayor, and he kind of elevated the status of London mayor. Sadiq Kahn, not so much. He's been a fairly disastrous figure, in fact. And the only time we hear about him, actually, is when he's having a Twitter spat with Donald Trump. And so in the piece I said yesterday, I sort of thought it was a shame that Donald Trump was sort of stooping to Sadiq Khan's level, because Sadiq Khan was clearly kind of trolling Trump, who is, of course, himself a bit of a troll, for a reaction by posting a video calling him a fascist, writing another article implying that he was very destructive to international relations. But Trump does like Boris, although I understand that Boris has turned down the opportunity of meeting him this week because he's at a very delicate stage in trying to become leader, and quite a few Tory MPs that he wants to vote for him would be put off if he was seen to be palling with Trump, which is sad, I think, about the state of the Tory party, but nonetheless, sensible.
I mean, he also likes Nigel Farage as Trump for all kinds of obvious reasons. But is it your handle that Boris Johnson is the odds-on favorite to replace May?
He is the favorite. He's the bookmaker's favorite. If he gets through to the second round, he will destroy anybody he faces, because then the vote goes out to the conservative grassroots who love him. The trouble is the Tory MPs aren't so keen on him, and in fact, in that way, he's quite similar to Trump, who is obviously very popular with Republican voters, but took a while for the party to warm up to him.
What is the future of Brexit once a new prime minister takes over?
That is a very, very difficult question to answer. We've managed to make an amazing mess of it over the last 2-3 years, and I think this is an opportunity. I mean, the departure of Theresa May gives us an opportunity to sort of reset Brexit. And if Boris comes in, I think there's some enthusiasm that Britain might actually be able to withdraw itself from the European Union rather than trying to find ever more complicated ways of staying in.
And how does Nigel Farage, who seems to be more popular than the other two parties combined, how does he fit into this mix?
Well, Farage, it poses a threat. And what will be very interesting is if the Tory party managed to elect a Remainer leader, as in someone who wants to stay in the European Union, then there will be a great boon to Nigel Farage and his new Brexit party, which is currently polling top in general election polls, which is an extraordinary feat for a party that was just formed a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and the conversation that Trump is having more generally with May and and his discussions about the European Union generally. Walter Mead had a good piece in the Wall Street Journal about this, Trump's case against Europe. And he just talks about uh, Trump isn't treating Europe the way he's treating China. He just sees Europe as sort of a mix of dysfunctional policies, unrealistic ideas about world politics, and poor institutional arrangements. And this is why he supports insurgents like a Boris Johnson. This is why he criticizes an Angela Merkel, because he thinks the EU is too German centric. Obviously, he thinks it's too liberal and it's not paying its fair share with respect to some of the global institutions as well, like NATO. What's your read on the Western Europe reaction to Trump, particularly in the wake of the results from the EU parliamentary elections?
Well, I think Trump has made it pretty obvious that he regards the EU as a kind of racket for German manufacturing. And I think a lot of people in parts of Europe outside of Germany and even inside it think that's quite a fair assessment. And I think that Europe is burdened with huge problems for the future. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Italy, there's a populist uprising in Italy, growing Euroscepticism across the continent. Trump's attitude towards the EU is more where the political energy is than with the status quo.
And what about the cultural piece? Obviously, with the continued saga of border security, the humanitarian as well as security crisis we have on our southern border, and what Trump finds instructive about the EU's experience with multiculturalism.
What? Sorry, you went a bit quiet there. On the line.
Sorry, I was just talking about the border security issue in this country, humanitarian and security crisis at the border, and what Trump may find instructive about the EU's experience with multiculturalism.
Well, yes. I mean, everybody knows that Angela Merkel, who was once the sort of queen of Europe, made this terrible mistake in 2015 to open the floodgates to the refugee crisis. And she tried to present it as a great humanitarian gesture, but it backfired terribly and has really crippled her politically. So I think the lesson of Merkel for Trump is that open borders is not a good sell politically at home.
And what about trade policy? Is there a consideration for Trump's perspective on, frankly, using tariffs to punish bad actors, as well as punishing American consumers, of course?
Well, as I understand it, Trump is very keen to get Europe to lower tariffs or to be less protectionist towards American agriculture. And he's hoping he can use Britain as leverage in that. And that a free trade deal with Britain would be useful leverage against European tariffs. Whether he's successful at lowering European tariffs is another question. I mean, as far as I can see, Europe is so bent on being a protectionist bloc itself that it will stick to its guns, even on agriculture.
Was there one fateful mistake that Theresa May made in trying to affect the election results on Brexit that turned it into the catastrophe that it became?
It's just one mistake. It's just one that she didn't do one single thing right, I think would be
okay.
A more fair summary. But no, I think that the real problem with Theresa May was she never wanted to leave the European Union. So she was always trying to come up with inventive ways of making Brexit mean Brexit, as she put it, without actually taking the fatal plunge, not even fatal plunge, but taking the decisive plunge of breaking away from the European Union.
What's next for her? Freddie? Hello?
Hello, Dan. Sorry, I lost you there.
Oh, yeah.
I just said, what's next for Theresa May? She's resigning or stepping down on Friday, correct?
She is stepping down on Friday. I think actually she might be slightly better as an ex-prime minister than previous prime ministers. I mean, Tony Blair is now quite an embarrassing figure who goes around sucking up to oligarchs and trying to make as much money as he can.
Sure.
David Cameron is sort of mingling a little bit, trying to get back into politics a little bit, but not very successfully so far. May is a more staid and sort of uncharismatic figure, so she could easily return to front bench politics in a kind of minor cabinet role, and I don't think she'd mind that.
Maybe she'd come over here and build houses with Jimmy Carter. She could be your Jimmy Carter. How about that?
They would be quite a team.
Freddy Gray, editor of The Spectator. Check out his piece, Donald Trump Should Not Stoop to Sadiq Khan's Level, as well as the cosmic magnetism of Trump and Brexit. Good pieces at Spectator, at The Spectator, spectator.com. I'm sorry, that's not the website. Spectator.us. Spectator.us. Sorry about that. Freddy Gray, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Yeah, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer.